Welcome everyone to Canary and Conscia's webinar From Frustration to Satisfaction. Today we will be talking about end user experience for roughly 40-45 minutes. And by we, I mean me. I'm Anders Lundin. I'm a solution architect at Canary. Been working with observability and application performance management and the end user experience tied to it for almost 17 years now. In my daily work, I do both a little bit of a market check to understand what's out there and what kind of solutions are there, as well as actually getting hands-on dirty together with the customers and their solutions, basically. Together with me today, I have
Thomas Henmar, based in Copenhagen, have 20 years experience of application performance monitoring and observability. And of course, end user experience is one of my key things.
So today, when we're going to talk about end user experience, what we did was divide it into 4 parts, basically. First of all, why do we need end user experience? Why should we actually care about it? Secondly, how should we do this? What type of metrics should we be looking at? And so on. Thirdly, who should we monitor? Sort of a run through of the different end users that we are expecting and maybe not expecting to monitor. And then in the end, we will run a summary and also answer the questions. During the webinar, you're free to add the questions in the chat, and we will take care of that in the end, basically. So first of all, why do we need end user experience? And I bet you have something to say about that, Thomas.
Yeah, so basically it's all about first impression matters. And when looking at us two good-looking guys here, I still hope that we have people left in the audience. But jokes aside, let's talk about web page and performance. We all need to have pages that are performing quite fast, and also it needs to look nice. And when you basically put nice content on the web page, it creates overhead. An example not from the website, but from the real life is like the iPhone in the top right corner here, where the iPhone itself, when you unwrap it, is just a device basically, but the experience on unwrapping it, taking out of the package, peeling out the plastic and everything, is quite an experience. And it's not only from Apple, everybody else is copying that basically. And a lot of people are actually posting videos on YouTube around this. So there's a lot of videos out there, people unboxing stuff. So that's also part of the experience when you're basically buying a new device or anything else. The example with the food is basically how you can take standard, maybe ordinary food, and repackaging in a nice way. Put it in a nice box, nice colors, do a lot of things around the decoration around it. That's also a good experience, but it all creates overhead. Overhead can be in performance, but it could also be in the way of pricing. So that's basically ways of introducing the first impression for the end users. But basically, when we talk about end user monitoring, is that important at all? Because when we're talking to customers or new prospects, we're basically hearing that, yeah, but we are measuring from a data center point of view, or it's not that important, or nobody's looking at it, and if the site is failing, they will probably come back, and that's the wrong attitude to have around it. Because we really have a very good example on this. It's a few years old, actually 5 years exactly today. A guy that is posting on X that is trying to access his bank, Aldermore Bank, and is asking on X, like everybody else is doing on social media, that is the website down? I tried it from Edge and I tried it from Chrome. He actually tried a few scenarios, light troubleshooting. And actually, the day after, the bank came back and said, we have no issues reported at all. And hopefully, did you manage to do whatever banking business that you were supposed to do? And he said that everything is fine today, but I'm surprised that you didn't monitor at all. And that could basically conclude that post on X. But actually, one of our technology partners are actually monitoring this, not only that bank, but a lot of banks around Europe. And they actually catch this issue here. So yeah, I know it's quite a busy slide, but please look into the red circle here. So they are proactively monitoring the different banks from different locations. In this case, it's from Spain, from Sweden, and from Texas, where the 3 green dots basically shows that, yes, the bank was available, and we can reach the website from those locations. But if you look at the 2 last ones, the red ones, from Cork Island and from Dublin Island, that was basically failing. So there must have been some issues on the internet, some routing, some whatever that has been failing. And that's basically why this user experienced a bad performance or unavailable websites. And the bank didn't see it because they were probably only monitoring it from the inside. That's basically why it's important to look at it from the outside in.
Yeah.
So.
And absolutely, if they would be looking at it from the server side, no change will be seen. They still get the requests in, they still get response times, everything seems okay. But in the end, at some locations, you are actually losing customers. So this is an example that's more availability than performance related, basically, because they had a real outage. But of course, performance of web pages and transactions affect in the same way. And in order to sort of segue that over to what we want to do with moving people to satisfaction from frustration, we need to look at the performance as well. And why do we want to do that? Well, it's because a lot of the researchers, there are many researchers around this if you Google it yourself, but all of them basically says the same thing. Whatever the numbers are, it's the same thing. Response time compared to the conversion rate, and conversion rate, sometimes that could mean that you're actually buying something if this is an e-commerce site, but it could also be something a lot more exciting like time reporting, submitting your time report or something like that.
Or it could be signing up for a newsletter.
It could be, absolutely, which is a good thing often. You also see that Akamai did something similar when they were talking about how much does actually a response degradation hurt my business. We also see this ourselves, actually, because sometimes we are part of, funnily enough, Canary releases. It's the same name, but that's just a coincidence, actually, where you're comparing one release to another, and you're actually monitoring conversion rate between these two different releases. And we can see the same thing. It's most of the time, it's not a huge difference, but there is a difference. And a conversion change is going to hit your business in the end, basically. Mm-hmm. So if we now decided that, yes, it is a good idea to monitor end user experience because it's something that matters, apparently, how would we actually go about that? What kind of metrics do we have? What kind of possibilities is actually there? And I think, Thomas, you might have something to say about that.
Of course, there are many ways of monitoring performance on a web page because they are quite dynamic and they are built in many different ways. And also, depending on where you're coming from and what your business are, it can be quite different. Marketing has their KPIs, data centers have their KPIs, but we are looking at it more from the observability point of view. So looking at a few standard metrics that are quite important to follow and also quite easy to follow and set up if you're looking using the right tools. The first one is a classic one, the page load time, and it's not used that often anymore because pages today tends to be quite bigger than just a normal size web page that it was in the old days when I was young, basically. And today we see web pages, these single page web pages that are quite long. And I have an example with me today that is from the Danish radio. That's basically the web page is quite long. And if you are using page load time for this page, it might take 20, 25, 30, 40 seconds to load because they are putting a lot of content into it. And they're also maybe putting ads and other third-party integrations to it that could also put some overhead on the response time. So to the right here is the same page, just in where I zoomed out, you can see it. So what we recommend today is basically use the visual complete. Sometimes it's called something else in different tools, but normally it's called visual complete. That basically takes into account the individual user's browser and size of the screen that they're using. So this is basically the same page that I have access with my browser on my laptop. And the visual complete is basically the browser's rendering of this specific visible page of the site. It's a bit like if you compare it to a newspaper that is folded and you're seeing the above the fold, the top part of it, but when you unfold it, it's basically the rest of the page you see. So it's the same way of measuring the performance and keeping the attraction of the people. That's quite a good metric to follow. Another one that's been around for some while, but also quite important and to look at, is the DEX. DEX is an organization that was formed like 10 or 12 years ago that basically are creating a way of monitoring performance and satisfaction across websites, across sizes, across technologies. So it's quite easy. You could probably see it in the yellow box how you calculate it. But it's basically a good way of categorizing how the users are frustrated, tolerant, or satisfied. That's the main categories. And by default, the satisfied users are within 2 seconds. And then normally you take the 2 seconds and add it and multiply it by 4. So anything between 2 and 8 seconds is tolerant, and the rest is frustrated. And then some of the observability platforms can add more metrics or more things to add to these different ways of monitoring.
Absolutely. We see, for example, that AppDex is added, is used when you're adding availability. So basically you can opt in to say that, okay, availability errors for my end users like JavaScript and stuff should also affect the AppDex, which is, it makes a lot of sense. But it is a good way to sort of combine and not having to set limits on every specific transaction, for example, just to have a quick overview that's sort of standardized. So, of course, when we talk about standardized ways of monitoring things to increase the visibility on end user experience, you cannot go anywhere without mentioning Google, of course. So a few years ago, they came up with their core Web Vitals, which is their standardized way of monitoring performance. Basically, it consists of 3 important metrics. It's the LCP, so that means the largest contentful paint. Basically, it's your experienced load time of a page, basically. It's the INP, which is a responsive index for responsiveness. So basically it means if you have a preloaded page, but you're clicking on a menu, for example, or something like that, that's supposed to happen, but no page reload, then it's the INP time. So basically how you see it reacting quickly or not, I guess. Then thirdly, they added something a little bit interesting, which is the CLS. So basically that's an index that's created on, let's say it monitors the stability or measures the stability of your page while it's loading. So I'm sure you have had, I know have, the page that's loading and you're aiming for the yes button, and when you click, it's the no button instead because it changes. So this is one of the ways that you can actually measure this and monitor, and that's a very good way to get people to not being frustrated, right? Look at these things. These 3 measurements are also quite important because they are behind the calculation that Google does to put ranking in place and so on. So it does have a business impact.
The LCP, isn't that also covering the fact that people are forgetting to compress images, or even though that is on the one-on-one page when you are learning web design, but we still see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the large contentful paint, so whatever it takes to paint something, and that would include it, yes. Yeah. And as you say, we see it more often than not, actually, that there's uncompressed content still. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about measuring some metrics, basically, and maybe you have something to say about third parties.
Third parties is quite interesting to look at as well, because many times you tend to forget to look at it, because third-party resources is basically tags or JavaScript or components that you put into your HTML page that are being rendered on the end user's device when it's basically being loaded and rendered. And you will not see that if you're only monitoring from the data center point of view. So in this example, you've got a frustrated user. That's quite obvious here. And you can see that the Acme Corporation is green arrows, meaning that everything is fine. They're looking at the data. They can see that they served the HTML fine. All error codes are fine. There's none at all. So everything is fine. But the user is frustrated. And that's probably because they incorporated, let's say for the social media that is orange, that they incorporated some links to like for Facebook, or they may put some Twitter into it, or maybe they're loading third-party resources like some kind of marketing frameworks or whatever it can be that can actually influence the performance of the end user. And you won't see it if you don't measure it from the end user's point of view. You see the CDN, the Content Delivery Network, is red, and basically content delivery network is basically when a company is having, let's say they're hosting it in London, but their users are coming from all around the world. So instead of transferring a lot of large content across the network, they use these local CDNs to basically host it. And no, Anders, you have a...
Yeah, I mean, this happens. I mean, first of all, not everyone sees it as a good idea to monitor end user performance in this, because they're thinking, okay, but I don't own the social media part. I can't affect the CDNs. But actually, it is going to be in the complete picture for the end user. So you are responsible for that experience, basically. So you have to do that. But for the CDN part, yes, you're absolutely right. There is so many cases where people actually have problems with this. Even though you think that you have an agreement for 99.99% uptime or something like that, still it's the other part, that's the 0.01 that's going to affect some user. And I had a case, it was in the autumn maybe, where a global company were using a new CDN network from a vendor. And I mean, they were convinced that 100% uptime. Of course, everything works. And they were monitoring on the server side. Everything looked good, response time as usual. But we did also have some end user experience monitoring. And then that suddenly popped away. And it turns out that in an update, these CDNs updated the rules and removed some of the rules, which meant that all requests from Europe actually went through Brazil and back to Europe. So, I mean, it added a lot of time, and they couldn't really see it unless they looked at the end user part.
Just think about the latency for all the components.
Exactly. I mean, the speed of light is you can't affect that, right?
No. And actually, let's say marketing. I found a post on one of the marketing sites that basically shows a director of marketing in education space that says that they are using Google Tag Manager and they are happy about it, and it's probably a good system. I don't doubt that. But what he says afterwards is basically that it's good because they don't necessarily have to go through IT department to add the tags and set it up. And that's quite a toxic way of doing it if you're not basically aligning, because they are probably downloading a tag that is seen somewhere, bought something that basically looks good and is good, but when it's be scaling up, or maybe the technology that you're using on the web page, they're not working quite good together, that can create a big harm on the web page, bad performance. So you need to be aligned and not just add content to the web page without aligning with IT, and the other way around, of course.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to ruin an end user's day, by adding something very big, and also the IT department that doesn't know about it. Yeah. And probably done on Friday afternoon as well, before marketing goes on vacation, basically. Okay, so we looked a little bit on how to get the visibility in terms of metrics, right? What would be a viable way to do it? Another thing is, of course, how do we get these metrics in? And there are basically, I would say there's 4 parts of this puzzle, but still 2 different ways. One is through synthetics, so basically robots doing something every 5 minutes or something like that from different locations. But there is also another side to it, and that's the real user monitoring, which actually looks at, well, you and me, I guess, when we're interacting with something. And of course, as you see, this is a puzzle in the picture. Doesn't mean that you have to have all the parts, right? It might be just 2 or 1, or depends on the size of the company and what you want to achieve. It's something you have to sort of think about each and every time, basically. So when we have gone through now a little bit about the different ways of doing the different metrics, so who should we be looking at? What are the different end users, basically?
Yeah, as I said, there's these 4 components, and you can use them individually, but they also complement each other quite good when you're using 1 or more, so 2 or more. But synthetic monitoring, again, that's something a lot of people did back in the days. Some are still doing it, but again, it's a thing that you forget to do quite good today, because it is quite important, and people can say that, yeah, but we have a very dynamic web page and we are changing it all the time, and there are many excuses, but it's just a matter of basically do the planning around it. In this example, I'm measuring from 4 different locations around the world. And these locations can be from many of the observability platforms that are around do have this already that you can just enable and start using. Or you can basically place your own robots or have a private location from these observability platforms. So that's quite easy to set up. And of course, it depends on how deep you want to monitor it. Of course, you want to monitor the web page availability and also look at some content and etc. But you also want to monitor it from the data center itself. So basically to have a baseline or a clean measurement of your application. You can argue and say that, yeah, but we don't need that because that does not reflect an end user. And that's true because you don't have the internet, the routing, and all the errors that can happen there. But that basically creates a baseline for you. So you know that if you're having an issue, is the robot in the data center failing? No. Then it's probably something outside, or it will be something outside, or the other way around. So that's a very good way of basically finding out where you need to put your troubleshooting resources.
Yeah, we when we deploy it with customers, I'm usually referring to it as a sanity check because that's what it is. You're removing a lot of different parts just to focus on, does it actually work here?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just by monitoring the application on availability, but you can also start to monitoring the performance and do some similarities around that. You can create a business flow. So let's say in e-commerce, the robot will go in, look at the page, look at some content to verify that we actually have the correct page and everything is rendered. You can search for an item, put the item into the basket, and remove it from the basket again because you probably won't have the robot to check it out.
Yeah,
otherwise,
I've had that happen actually, but that's another story.
And also, of course, the content, I mentioned that, but the HTTP code, the size of the page is quite important because it might be that, again, a third-party integration that are vital for the web page is not being loaded for some reason, and then the size of the page will shrink, and you need to monitor and verify that and baseline it so you get alerts or events based on that. So that's quite important as well. Another thing about synthetic monitoring, because when we are talking about web applications and we are talking about availability, how do you actually measure availability on a web page? And that's something, again, there's nothing wrong and right. It's something you need to discuss with the business in your organization on how you will handle that. Because in my point of view, if I go to canary.com and I just load the page and I get an 404 error, okay, I say, what's going on here? I'll just refresh the page and maybe I get a 500 or whatever. I'll refresh the page again and then the page appears and it's working perfectly. So for me, yes, the page was unavailable for 2 clicks, but it came to me within 5 seconds. So if you ask me the day after, was canary.com unavailable? No, everything was working fine because that's basically how internet is behaving. But having a correct way of, in my opinion, the availability of a web page, you need to use synthetic monitoring. Because again, it's the same scripts you are running from the same locations. So it's basically a clean way of measuring the availability of a web page. And when you have that, you can basically start using and defining SLOs for that web page. And then these SLOs, you can basically work with the business or third-party integrators on how they are performing. Because you can use the SLOs to improve, see how you're improving, or if you're not improving, where to basically start looking into how we can improve it. And basically, we got this SLIs, SLOs, and SLAs. SLAs is something that everybody's talking about. We need to have an SLA on this and that. And just remember an SLA that binds. That's basically when the penalty hits you, the hammer hits you basically. So we need to basically work with the SLOs and SLIs first. SLIs is basically the visual complete. It could be AppDex, it could be some of the Google stuff that Anders talked about. That basically is KPIs that you're driving and put into an SLO where you basically said, okay, we have this KPI. How much time do we need? Can we be unavailable before something hits us? And this is an example from another site where they're monitoring the 4 golden signals. The first dashboard is errors and throughput. But you can see on the top, they have a target of 98%, and the status right now is 99.538. That means that they have an error budget of 1.538. So they still have some time where they can be down or have some problems. 2 of the other goals is latency and saturations. And here they also doing the same, but with different targets. And again, the targets, everybody will say, yeah, we need to have either 100% or 99.99999. But in reality, it have to be lower because you cannot achieve the other one. Even Google don't have that high targets. So again, it's something that you need to talk to the business around and use these drivers to basically discuss if we are going to change it or where it should be, where is the normal. And that's very good to do that. One thing is percentages. Of course, you all seen on the internet that 99%, this is equal to 7.5 hours per month downtime. But you can also start doing another calculation that says, but if my target is 99%, and my SLO status right now is 99.91, that means that I have an error budget of almost 1%. And then you can convert that to minutes, how much I've spent or how much I have left. So in a task force environment, some says, yeah, but you have an error budget of 0, 9, 14%. What is that? I have no idea because right now things are going fast. But if you know that, yeah, but you still have 1.5 minutes left before the SLA is breached, that's something else to discuss about. So that's another way of
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can only stress a little bit more around the synthetic monitoring when it comes to SLOs and SLIs, because we have tried and also seen other customers try to use real users for SLOs because, you know, that is what matters. So they try to set something up, but it's very hard. It's very unpredictable. You know, they have a 3G connection for a while and then they have something else, and it's very hard to do. So we usually end up doing synthetic monitoring for that part.
And also remember, when you're doing synthetic, you still are looking at third-party integration, so you can still measure that and do SLOs and SLIs on that as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually do that for a few customers there, where they have some sort of integration, maybe a shop cart integration through an API or something, and then you put that part as the part of the monitoring, basically. It doesn't mean that you have an SLA in the end, but it means that you can follow up and discuss on what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
Right, so when we're going through a little bit the different type of end users we will be monitoring, we have come to the employees, which or
is your colleagues,
or you could be my colleagues. Yes, I don't want to monitor those guys, but. Yes, so the employees would be the next
yeah. We have been talking a lot about web applications, and many times we're talking about customers for e-commerce or whatever. But of course, we can also have web pages inside our organization, like the intranet or whatever. But there's also the importance of measuring the satisfaction of the users when they're using their devices, whether it's a laptop, desktop, mobile phone, or whatever device that you are being handed out by the organization. It's important to monitor those as well. Of course, one thing is the user productivity, not meaning that how fast Anders is working.
Don't measure that.
But basically, when you're using an application, how much time are you losing by spending the time on a spinning wheel or not responding in the title bar of the window or what it is. So that's a very, very important thing to measure, because if you want to do a business case on we need to upgrade our whatever system it is, then you have the data to basically support it that, yeah, but if we achieve a better performance, we will have a better productivity with our users, and with the better productivity, we will have more satisfied users.
Absolutely.
And you can also use a digital employee experience DEX solution to actually ask the users, how satisfied were you with creating a ticket in ServiceNow or whatever. So have this live questioning to send to their laptop, so you can get immediately answer at the moment. Of course, device performance, that's out of the box for these kind of tools. You know everything about the device. And of course, the application performance, that's also some quite important thing, because that basically can drive some XLAs with the business as well. So you know exactly when adding something into the calendar or updating your SAP time schedule or whatever, how long did it take, again, to figure out how the productivity index for the users. And also with the new generation that we are seeing, not us old guys here, but we see that they also want to have fast responses. They want to have the new technology, and if they're not getting it as they want, they're sent to basically churn away from the company, and that costs a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. And if we're talking churn rate for employees, I mean, quitting your job and so on, that's sort of an exact connection to what we were talking about earlier about conversion rates. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just that one probably stays longer than the other one, but still the same thing. And these kind of questions regarding DEX, employee experience, is something we've seen rise quite a lot after COVID, basically, because before you had the measurement of someone complaining at a coffee machine. At least you heard about it. Maybe they didn't call the help desk, but at least there was some sort of understanding. But now when everyone, or at least everyone, is working from home, it's completely different. And the threshold of giving the help desk a call is even higher when you're from home, because it might be my whatever device at home, basically. So we're seeing a bigger increase in demand for these kind of solutions. And also, of course, it's monitoring Office 365, and if you're doing it from home, it's a little bit different story than from the office and so on. So it's more points, basically, and all in order to understand if users are frustrated or not, basically.
Yeah, and talking about frustrated users, we have a case recently for a company that were having these agents in Asia. The company was based in Norway, or is based in Norway, and they have a lot of small offices in Asia where these agents are basically booking containers. And these small offices don't have IT staff. They are basically on their own with their internet connection or whatever it is. But there was this office that basically complained that the booking application they were using was basically crashing all the time. And it was only happening in the office, not when they were working from home. And since there was no IT staff on site and they don't have IT background, it was quite hard to remotely support them, other than try another PC or try this and this and this. So they came to us and asked, can you help us? And we implemented this DEX solution to them. And quite fast, one of our consultants figured out that basically this specific application, when they're sitting in the office, they were roaming between 3 different access points in the office. So this doesn't cause a problem because the applications or the protocols can handle it. But this specific application needs to have a constant connection to the backend. That basically every time the roaming was done, the application crashed and it got disconnected. And this is quite hard to troubleshoot if you don't have the facts and compare the facts to the crashes and to the metrics that we are collecting in the background. That's basically why a tool like DEX is quite important.
And absolutely, in this case, I mean, it's a good example of getting from frustration to satisfaction. Yeah. I mean, we could pinpoint, it's this rather boring, but still problematic problem, basically.
Sometimes these problems I can just try to move around in the office, and that can help.
Yeah,
but that's a quick fix.
A workaround.
But basically, they're starting to use the DEX solution now to measure the satisfaction between for the users, but also the devices, and dividing into which collaboration tools they're using, the business applications, and have this dashboard, the traffic light to the left, where they're following the score, and to the right, they can basically see it over time. Are we improving or not improving at all? So we can start following up. So that's quite important also, and another way to monitor it. So it's not only web applications, but it can be all sorts of applications distributed in all sorts of ways.
Right, so let's get into the second part of the different customers then. This was the employees, basically. Another way of looking at things would be Internet of Things, basically.
Yeah. And of course, you can argue if this is a user or not, but for us, it's a user because they are basically sending data or getting data that they are needed to do their task whenever they are. Yes, they are a small electronic thing. It could be a thermostat in your office or at your home. It could be you monitoring your electric meter or whatever. Even the smartwatches, it could be one of these. All this kind of stuff that are basically collecting data and sending it to a central place to be analyzed and to be used in the future to improve or whatever it can be. So this is another way where you need to monitor those as well. But it's not that easy because there are thousands of different protocols and ways of connecting. And of course. But the majority of them are sending data to a centralized place and sending it further down. So it's quite important to start monitoring that. And just to give an example of an IoT transaction, if you could call it that, it's basically you have an electric car and you need to charge it on the holiday. Then you basically look up where is the closest charging station. It finds it. It's 15 spaces left. It shows you the direction. You come in and see, and you park your car at the correct charging station that you got appointed. You park the car, you plug it in, it starts charging, and you do the payment. Again, a lot of IoT devices are in place here, from your device to the car, the stuff in your car that measures how much do we need to charge, how fast can we charge, if we're going to reach our destination in time. All these kind of things need to be taken into account. And of course, the charging stalls themselves also have a lot of devices built in to monitor the temperature, the current, and all that stuff. All these need to be taken into account to give you a good experience when you're charging your
Absolutely,
car.
And as you say, it's all about, they are sort of a user as well, because as you said, they need to consume the data, and they need to do it in a timely manner and without errors, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Another example we have, a live example, is a customer in Norway that are having a lot of windmills, and basically these windmills do have a lot of proprietary systems themselves, but they also wanted to see, could we do anything to help them to proactively monitor and also verify the data. So we quickly set up a synthetic monitoring just to reach out to the central point where the windmills are sending the data. We're not doing it for the individual windmill, we can't do that because of the way they are communicating. But we can see that they are able to offload the data to a central point. Then we are basically connecting to that central point and do the remote monitoring to see how are the statuses, because these are IoT devices. One thing is that they are collecting data and send it, but they also send how the status of the IoT device, have there been any issues or whatever, and we are monitoring those as well from the observability point of view. Then these windmills, in this case, are sending weather data to the government, and they are obligated to do that. So we also verifying that this data is being collected and sent further down the stream, so everything is being handled accordingly. And of course, this is put onto live dashboards, and we're putting alerting on if some of the windmills or central points are not answering, or if something else is going on. This is basically a live example on how you can use an observability platform on a quite different way that we normally see.
Yeah, but still sort of an end user experience in a way. So talking about something non-human like windmills, it's at least in the most cases, I guess it is, moving into the next category of users that might be coming up. I'd like to call it the unwanted and unexpected users. And I've put them into 4 different categories. As you can see, I call them friends and foes, because they could be both on your side or cause you problems. So basically, if we talk about the first part, it's the good bots. It's your Bing bots, your Google bots, basically bots instrumenting, well, not instrumenting, but collecting data from your site to index, for example, so that you get easily found on Google, for example. Also, these are doing those measurements that we talked about in the beginning, the core web vitals, basically to instrument and understand how good is this site actually, because it affects your ranking. I have an example actually where we saw, or the customer saw, that these Bing bots and Google bots were actually using, I can't recall, but tens of percent of the total capacity. And then they basically said, oh no, let's down prioritize that. It's more important than with real users. And it was even availability problems for these bots. You had 500 errors every now and then. And then we sort of realized that no, we should treat them as humans. They might even be more important, because you get a bad score otherwise. There is also the partner bots. So this might be if you're in the betting industry or you're in the travel industry, you might want to have someone fetch data from you so that's it available somewhere else, like a flying site where you sort of book your airplanes and look for travels, basically. Yes, you want to be part of that. So you want those systems to pull the data from you, but you want them to do it through the API or whatever you agreed on. We have seen quite a lot of examples actually where we have these partners or possible partners that are using some other types of methods, basically, which is not what you want to, but it's still, you want them to fetch the data, but you need to identify them and basically contact them and say, hey, why don't you do that this way instead? And then fourthly, we have the totally unwanted bots. There is no benefit for you there. It could be your competition trying to scrape some data to use for some, I don't know what purpose, but not something you would like. It could be DDoS attacks and stuff like that. Problematic thing with these, they are not very polite, so they don't really introduce themselves. It's hard to identify them, basically. Lastly, we have the actual real users. So people like you and me, basically. Well, the employees, we're employees as well, but in this case, that travels your websites, basically. And I wanted to actually use an example for this one.
Yeah, because we did cover a lot of the real users earlier with the DEX and everything. This is a good example here.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, it's quite a busy dashboard at this point. It contains a lot of things. It is a real dashboard from a real customer, real data and so on. I've just modified it a little bit so it's anonymous. But the good thing with this, and why I want to use it as an example, is not only that, yes, we have lots of metrics, synthetic and real and so on, but also how we're using it. It's a process on looking at changes and making sure that things are getting better and not worse. Basically, we started out with what many people do, I guess, looking at synthetic performance for 4 or 5 of the most important business transactions, basically, and we can follow that over time. This is just a short time span. Really, we can do it through a year or something, just to see, are we heading in the right direction or not? When we did that, the first question came up when something is happening with the graphs. It's basically, okay, did someone release something? So we correlate that back with data on what kind of releases has been done, because there's many teams that are able to release things at almost any time, basically.
I like that they could basically compare it, because sometimes you just look at the performance and you have no idea on it can relate it to something. So this
it was always the first question: who did something, or rather, first, did anyone do something? And that actually answers that. And the second thing, or actually third, then, is that we started to think about, okay, we can see that we have a problem with the synthetic. Does it actually affect real users? So then we added the aspect of real users as well, in order to be able to correlate it. And as you can see, this is always almost always the case. A real user varies quite a lot over time, and that's why you shouldn't use them for the SLOs and stuff, because it's very hard to do that in a nice way. We also added, of course, some of the Google metrics as well, because we are closely talking to developers, and they really like those things. That's much more to look at in that page, but we're sort of running out of time, so let's skip that part, I guess. Well, one more thing, actually. Some of the vendors are actually doing something else in order to detect frustration. So not only performance and availability, but something called rage click. So basically they're detecting that if you are on your mobile phone and you're like, log in, what the fuck? Log in, and then then it turns up as a rage click. So it's a good way to see if someone is actually unhappy. Frustration at its best. So that is actually all the content we had today. I'd like to summarize quickly what we've done. I mean, the purpose was to go from frustration to satisfaction, and what we have done is show you and talk about what kind of metrics can we use, what kind of methods to obtain these metrics, and the biggest value when you actually implement this is you get the details needed for the different departments to actually change something. You know that it's the CDM, maybe you should have get a better contract, maybe it's something in your code, maybe it could be many different things, but you get the facts there. That's the important thing. And also, if you do this, you monitor over time, then you will get a baseline and you will know if you're actually improving or not, basically.
Cool.
Right,
we have some questions.
We do have questions.
Here's the last. This is a question: how do you monitor if your application is up, especially the part behind, example, MitID login? That's probably because in Denmark, but you have probably the same in Sweden.
You need
to have an
bank
app.
ID. Yeah.
So of course, the real users can be monitored when they are in. But from a proactive point of view, if you look at the example that I had, where we're having the baseline in the data center and the outside, and when you're doing it from the outside, of course, you will not monitor your application because the synthetic part will have a hard time going through that authentication because you're using some QR codes and whatever on your app. So you're basically monitoring, are we able to come, how far can we basically come down to this authentication? Then you do the robot within the data center to see if your application is up. And then many times these vendors that have these authentication systems are basically providing you metrics or statuses on how things are working. And you can retrieve these and put it into the observability tool. And when you do that, the machine learning can help you basically define what it is. But it is a problematic case.
We are actually doing that at a customer right now it's BankID in Sweden, but it's the same thing. So you can check with the APIs to BankID and so on and sort of correlate things together. But it's a good question because it's not entirely easy to get done. But we're more than happy to discuss that even more if there's a possibility.
Another question, are Google's core web vitals still relevant in 2025? And can you choose the metrics you monitor to align with them?
I would absolutely say that they're still valid. I mean, they are still used by Google. I mean, and everything Google uses is okay, I guess. But I mean, it's still the search engine optimization things that you need to take care of. So yes, they are absolutely relevant. What was the second part of the question? Yeah, can you choose the metrics
you monitor to align with them?
Oh, it's their own metrics basically. It's the own way to calculate them. But of course, what you actually do with them in the end, that you can choose.
Yeah. Then we have a question about privacy, GDPR. That was for the DEX part, but it basically goes for the whole way of monitoring end users. From the DEX part, of course, you can set up privacy, so you're not storing PII data like your email, your IP address, your device name and stuff like that. And of course, there's different ways depending on your role in the organization that you can see it or not. So that's many ways of doing that. And what about the web application?
Yeah, I mean, for the web application, real user monitors, it's the same question, obviously. What do you collect and what do you not collect? And of course, the vendors have to adhere it to those rules. So there is, I mean, if you're doing it internally, then you might be able to pick out more details, but anonymize it when you're doing it on a bigger scale, because it's not really a privacy invasion to look at. There's someone has this performance from this location. As long as there's not an IP address or a name or something like that, then it's quite okay, actually.
Yeah, cool.
Good, I think we're actually out of time.
Yep.
Believe it or not.
It has been a pleasure.
Same, likewise, Thomas.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending this webinar. You will get an email from Canary afterwards with the survey, so we can get some feedback on how we did and if we need to improve.
If you're frustrated.
Yeah, exactly. But thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice day.
Thank you.